You step up to the tee, you grip it tight, you swing as hard as you can, and you watch that ball peel off to the right, into the trees, into the next fairway, gone. I know that feeling in my bones. I lived it for the better part of 20 years, and I nearly quit the game over it. Here is what I learned the hard way. Your slice, your weak little fade, that distance you swear you used to have and lost almost none of it, is your swing plane, your stance, or that expensive driver you just bought. It comes down to one small thing your wrists do in the last 10 inches before the ball. 95% of golfers get that one thing backwards, and golfers have actually known the fix since at least 1955. Most of us just never got told. By the end of this, I will show you the exact wrist move that Ben Hogan buried inside a magazine article in August of 1955, the move he called his secret and a 10-second drill you can do right now in your living room with the very club you already own. No new gear, no lesson, no range membership. I remember the exact moment it broke me. It was a Saturday morning on the ninth hole at a little Muni course called Cedar Hollow, and I sliced 3 balls in a row over a fence into a soybean field while a group of teenagers waited behind me and pretended not to watch. I drove home that day thinking maybe I just wasn't built for this game. I was wrong. I was doing one thing wrong, and it took me years to see it. Let me start with a word everybody uses and nobody understands. Release. For most of my life, I thought releasing the driver meant letting go, letting the club fly through, rolling my hands over as fast as I could at the bottom. Everybody I ever played with told me the same thing. Roll your wrists. Turn them over. Snap it through. So I did. I rolled them like I was wringing out a wet towel, and I still sliced. Or worse, I'd snap one dead left into somebody's backyard. Here is what took me 2 decades to understand. Release is not rolling your hands. Release is the way your wrists deliver the club face square to the ball at the exact instant of contact. That's it. And the club face, not your swing path, is the boss. Modern launch monitors, the radar units the good teachers use now, have measured this thousands and thousands of times. When you make contact, roughly 85% of where that ball starts flying is decided by where your club face is pointing. Only about 15% comes from the path your club is traveling on. 85%. That is the whole ball game, and it lives in your wrists. So think about what that means. You can have a beautiful takeaway. You can have your feet perfect and your shoulders turn like a tour pro. But if your club face is open by just a few degrees when you strike the ball, that ball has gone right. Every single time, no matter how hard you try. I was fighting a slice with my whole body when the real problem was hiding in my wrists the entire time. Nobody at the pro shop ever told me that. They just kept selling me a new driver every couple of years, promising this one had the technology to fix it. But here is where it gets interesting, because a club face doesn't open itself. Something opens it. And once I understood what that something was, I couldn't unsee it. The claim sheet is of what's, because of what your 2 wrists do at the top of your swing and coming down. Let me make this dead simple, because the pros love to make it complicated. Hold your lead hand out in front of you. That's the left hand for a right-handed golfer. Your wrist can do 2 basic things. It can cup backward, bending so the back of your hand moves toward your forearm. Teachers call that extension. Or it can bow forward so your palm moves toward the inside of your forearm. They call that flexion. Cup and bow. That's all you need to remember. Now here is the thing that changed everything for me. When your lead wrist is cupped at the top of the swing and stays cupped coming down, your club face is wide open. Open face means slice. When your lead wrist is flat, or even slightly bowed, that club face is square or closed, and that ball flies straight or draws gently back to the left. 95% of amateur golfers cup that wrist. They cup it at the top, they hold the cup all the way down, and then in a panic, they try to save it by flipping their hands at the very last second. That flip is the slice killer's fantasy, and it never works because your hands can't move fast enough or consistently enough to fix in 1/100th of a second what your wrist set up a full second earlier. This is not new knowledge. This is old knowledge that got buried under marketing. Ben Hogan wrote about it in 1957 in a book called 5 Lessons: The Modern Fundamentals of Golf. That book has sold well over 1 million copies, and it is still, to this day, the clearest thing ever written about the golf swing. Hogan used a word most weekend golfers have never heard: supination. He said that through impact, the lead wrist should supinate, should roll and firm up so the palm turns slightly up and away with the wrist flat and leading. He drew a picture of it that I stared at for an hour once. A flat, firm lead wrist, the back of the hand facing the target, the club face square as a board. I read that when I was maybe 40 years old, and honestly, I didn't get it. It sounded like anatomy class. Supinate, pronate, extension, flexion. My eyes glazed over, and I went right back to trying to swing harder. That's the tragedy of good information. It gets written down, it gets proven, and then it gets forgotten because it sounds like homework, while some fellow on television tells you to just buy the new club and swing easy. But the physics don't care whether you understand the fancy words. The physics only care about the position of that club face. And Hogan figured out how to control it with his wrists back when he was grinding it out on hard practice tees in the 1940s and 50s, hitting more balls in a day than most of us hit in a year. Therefore, if it worked for the best ball striker who ever lived, on hickory hard range dirt with equipment far less forgiving than yours, it will work for you and me on a Saturday morning. Now let me tell you about the second half of the wrong move, because the cupped wrist has an evil twin. It's called casting, and it stole more distance from me than I want to admit. Casting is what happens when you throw the club head away from your body too early on the way down. Picture a fisherman casting a line, that flick of the wrist that sends the lure out. That same flick in a golf swing is a disaster. When you cast, you release all the stored energy in your wrists way too soon, up here when the club is still high, instead of down here at the ball where it counts. By the time the club head reaches the ball, it has already spent all its speed. It's slowing down at the exact moment it should be at its fastest. I used to think I was losing distance because I was getting older and weaker. I was 50-some years old, telling myself my body just couldn't generate the power anymore. That was a lie I told myself for years. When I finally got my swing on a launch monitor at an indoor place one winter, the fellow running it looked at the screen and said my club head speed at the top of my downswing was fine, strong even, but by the time I reached the ball, I had bled off nearly 10 miles an hour. 10. He said, you're not slow, you're early, you're casting, you're spending your speed before you get to the ball. That word early stuck with me. Early. All those years I thought I needed more strength, and what I actually needed was better timing in my wrists. The energy was there. I was just dumping it in the wrong spot. Here is the science behind it, and it's the same science that lets a hammer drive a nail. When you keep the angle between your lead arm and the club shaft that bend in your wrists for as long as possible on the way down, you store energy, like a spring wound tight. Then you let it release at the bottom, right at the ball. Physicists who study the golf swing call it maintaining lag, and they've measured that good players hold that wrist angle until their hands are down near their front hip, sometimes a wrist angle of 90 degrees or tighter, and then it whips through. That whip, that late unhinging, can add somewhere between 15 and 30 yards to a drive for an average golfer, without swinging one bit harder. 15 to 30 yards. That's the difference between laying up and reaching the green. And it costs you nothing but understanding. So now you can see the trap, right? 95% of us cast early and cup the wrist. Early release, open face. We spend our speed too soon, and we leave the face wide open. Slow and to the right. And what does the golf industry tell us to do about it? It tells us to buy a bigger driver head, a lighter shaft, a ball with less spin. Anything but the truth, which is free. And this is the part that started to make me a little angry, if I'm honest, once I saw it clearly. The fix has been sitting in a 1957 book and a 1955 magazine article the whole time. But there's no money in telling a man his wrists are the problem. There's a lot of money in telling him his equipment is the problem. A new driver runs $500, $600 now, sometimes more. I bought a new one just about every 2 years for the better part of 20 years, chasing a fix that a 10-second wrist drill would have given me for nothing. Do that math with me. That's easily $5,000 or $6,000 I handed over. And my slice came along for every single ride, because the problem was never in the box. The teaching side isn't much better. I took lessons where the pro filmed my swing from 4 angles, drew lines all over the screen, and talked about my hip depth and my spine tilt for $45 a half hour. Think about all those half hours you paid for, and you still walked to the tee not knowing where the ball would go. That guessing is exactly what I wanted gone for good, and it's why I finally wrote everything down in the Complete Strike system, the instant PDF download that lays out the real ball striking mechanics behind that flat lead wrist, the trail arm sequencing nobody shows you, and how to read every miss the moment the ball leaves the face. It's the full permanent version of the fix you're feeling right now. Not tips, not gear, not guesswork, just 388 plus pages of the stuff that actually works. And you don't have to take my word for it tonight. Grab whatever club is leaning in your closet, set that lead wrist flat with the club face pointing down instead of up, hold it for a slow count of 10, and feel for yourself how strange but right it starts to feel. That's the whole engine of the book in one free rep at your kitchen counter. The fastest way to get the books is to scan the QR code right there on your screen, or go to the link in the description or the pinned comment. And here's the honest part. The moment you stop chasing a new driver every couple of years, the money you were bleeding stops bleeding. And that's true no matter when you're watching this. Because next I want to show you the therefore of all this, that if the fix really is this simple, you should be able to feel it in your own home tonight. Not one of them ever put my hand out and said, cup or bow. They kept it complicated, because complicated keeps you coming back. Simple sends you home fixed, and a fixed golfer doesn't book another lesson. But therefore, if the fix is that simple, you should be able to feel it without any of that in your own home tonight. And that's exactly what I want to show you next, because I know some of you are thinking this sounds like more than you signed up for. Now, maybe you're sitting there thinking, this is fine for a fellow who plays every weekend, but I only get out a few times a summer, and I'm not about to go stand on a driving range and rebuild my swing. I hear you. I really do. I put off trying any of this for years because I thought fixing my release meant hundreds of range balls and a whole new swing. It doesn't. This next part I figured out specifically for people who don't have the time, the money, or the patience for all that. You can do it standing in your living room, in your socks, with the club leaning in your closet right now. Here is the 10-second wrist fix. Grab your driver, or honestly any club, or even a broomstick if the club's out in the garage. Stand up straight. Take your normal grip. Now, without swinging, just lift the club up to about waist height out in front of you, so the shaft is pointing straight out toward the wall, parallel to the floor. Look at the back of your lead hand and look at the club face. Here's the whole secret in one move. Set your lead wrist so it's flat, or even bowed just slightly forward, and turn it so the club face is pointing straight ahead, or even a touch down toward the ground, the toe of the club pointing more up than out. That's a square to closed face. That's the feeling of a flat lead wrist. Hold it for a slow count of 10. 1, 2, 3, all the way to 10. Feel where your wrist is. Feel that the back of your hand faces forward, not up at the sky. That flat, slightly bowed feeling, that is what your wrist needs to do through the ball. Now do the opposite so you can feel the wrong way too. Cup that lead wrist backward, let the club face open up and point at the sky, and notice how weak and floppy it feels. Cup, that's the slice. Flat, that's the fix. Go back and forth 10 times. Cup, flat, open, square. That's it. 10 seconds a day, and your hands start to learn the flat position without any thinking at all. I did this drill while my coffee was brewing every single morning for about 3 weeks. That's the whole investment. Standing at the kitchen counter, club in hand, going cup, flat, until the flat position started to feel normal instead of strange. And the first time I took that feeling to the course, I hit a drive that started slightly left and drew back to the middle of the fairway, and I stood there like a fool with my mouth open because I had been trying to hit that shot for 20 years. Now, there's a second half to this drill that handles the casting, the early release, and you can do it in the same living room without hitting a thing. Take that club and make a slow motion downswing, but freeze when your hands get down to about hip height. Freeze right there and look. If you're doing it right, there should still be a big angle between your lead arm and the shaft. The club should still be pointing up and back over your shoulder, not already flung out at the ball. That's holding your lag. That's keeping your speed for the bottom. Do that freeze frame 10 times, slow, feeling that angle hold. You're teaching your body to be late instead of early. Late with the release, early with nothing. Here's a little trick that made it click for me. When you swing down, feel like you're pulling the handle of the club down toward the ground with the butt end leading, like you're trying to keep the club head behind your hands as long as you possibly can. Keep the handle ahead, the head behind until the very last second, then let it fly through. Butt first, then the whip. Try it in the air right now, 10 slow swishes. You'll actually hear it. When you cast early, the swish sound happens up high, before the bottom. When you hold the lag and release late, that swish moves down to the bottom, right where the ball would be. Move the swish to the bottom. That sound is your speed arriving at the right time. I want to be clear about something, because this audience has been sold a lot of nonsense over the years, and I don't blame anyone for being skeptical. You do not need a single new thing to do any of this. Not a training aid, not a weighted club, not one of those hinged gadgets they advertise for $99 that promises to fix your wrists. You need the club you own and 10 seconds. That's the honest truth, and the honest truth doesn't cost anything, which is probably why nobody's been shouting it at you. But here's the question that kept nagging at me even after the living room drills started working. Where did this actually come from? Who figured out the precise wrist move first? And why did it slip out of common knowledge so completely that 95% of us are doing it backwards? That answer took me down a rabbit hole, and what I found at the bottom is the best kept secret in golf. In the summer of 1955, Ben Hogan did something almost unheard of. He agreed to give away his secret. Hogan was famously private about his swingmen would sneak around his practice sessions with binoculars trying to figure out how he did it, because after a terrible car crash in 1949 that nearly killed him, he came back and somehow hit the ball better than before. People were desperate to know what he knew. And that summer, Life magazine paid him a great deal of money, and on August 8th, 1955, they published it under a headline promising Hogan's secret at last. Here's what he revealed, and it lines up exactly with everything I just showed you. Hogan said that for years he fought a hook the opposite of my slice, but the same root problem, a club face that turned over too much and too fast. To cure it, he did two things with his hands and wrists. First, he weakened his lead hand grip, turning that hand a little more on top of the club so he could see fewer knuckles. And second, this is the piece that matters most, near the top of his backswing, he let his lead wrist cup, and then coming through, he consciously kept that wrist from rolling over. He kept the back of that lead hand leading toward the target, flat and firm through the ball, so the club face could not flip shut. He called that supination, that flat-wristed leading position through impact, and he said it let him swing as hard as he possibly wanted with no fear, because the face simply could not close on him. Now stay with me, because here's the beautiful part for those of us who slice instead of hook. Hogan's problem was too much closing. Ours is too much opening. But the cure lives in the exact same place, that flat, controlled lead wrist through impact. Hogan used it to stop the face flipping shut. We use it to stop the face hanging open. Same wrist, same flat position, same firm leading hand, opposite disease, one cure. The secret, the greatest ball striker in history paid a magazine to hide inside a wall of anatomy words, the secret men chased with binoculars, is the same 10-second flat wrist feeling you just practiced at your kitchen counter. And here is the piece that got my blood up. That article ran in 1955. The follow-up book, 5 Lessons, came out in 1957, and it laid the whole thing out with diagrams a child could follow. It has been in print for nearly 70 years. The knowledge was never lost. It was never really secret after 1955 at all. It got drowned out. Every year, a new wave of drivers and shafts and gadgets and quick-fix videos washed over it until a plain truth that a man revealed for the good of the game got buried under 60-some years of things somebody wanted to sell you. Somebody quietly kept it alive, the golfers who actually read Hogan, the old teaching pros who came up before the marketing took over, and now you have it too. I want to give you one more piece that Hogan understood and almost nobody talks about, because it's what makes the flat wrist actually stick under pressure. It's your grip pressure, and it's free. Hogan held the club firm but not tight, and the key was where the firmness lived in the last three fingers of the lead hand, the pinky side. When those fingers are secure, your lead wrist stays flat and can't collapse into a cup at the bottom. When you grip mostly with your thumb and forefinger, that wrist goes soft and floppy and the face flips open every time. So try this the next time out. Feel the pressure in the bottom three fingers of your lead hand, light in the trail hand, and let that firm pinky side grip hold your wrist flat through the ball. Grip cost you nothing. It was free the whole time. Put it all together and it's almost embarrassing how simple it is. Flat lead wrist, not cupped. Face square, not open. Hold your lag, release late, so your speed arrives at the ball instead of above it. Firm in the last three fingers so the wrist can't collapse. Cup flat, 10 seconds a day at the kitchen counter. That's the whole thing. That's what 95% of golfers never learned, and what the best there ever was told everybody, plain as day, in the summer of 1955. Here's what nobody tells you about finally hitting it straight. It isn't about the yards, though the yards are nice. It's about standing on that first tee with people watching and knowing where the ball is going to go. It's getting back the game you thought your body had taken from you. I got that back with a drill I do in my socks, and I never spent another dollar chasing it. If you're the kind of person who'd rather understand how something works than be sold a new gadget every spring, who trusts a plain old truth over a shiny promise, then you already think the way this whole thing is built. You were never a bad golfer. You were a well-taught golfer taught the wrong thing. So let me ask you straight, and I want you to actually tell me. When you set your lead wrist flat and looked at that club face pointing down instead of up at the sky, did it feel wrong, weak, backwards, like it couldn't possibly be right? Because for me, it felt completely unnatural the first 50 times, and that feeling is exactly how I knew I'd been doing it wrong for 20 years. Leave a comment and tell me, did the flat wrist feel strange to you at first? And tell me where you're watching from and how long you've been fighting that slice. I read them, and it helps to know I'm not the only one who spent years blaming the driver. If any of this hit home, come along with the rest of us who are done being sold the expensive, complicated version of everything. This is a whole crowd of folks recovering the simple, proven, forgotten stuff that actually works in the home, in the wallet, and out on the course. Subscribe and stand with us. Because the next thing I'm putting together is the one grip adjustment that quietly adds loft to your old irons without buying new ones. The same fingers, a different feel, and 10 extra feet of carry that's been hiding in your bag the whole time. I found it in the same corner of golf history nobody reads anymore, and I can't wait to show you. Before you go, one thing. This video showed you the idea. Inside the Old Ways Almanac, I keep going the full walkthrough step by step. And you can ask me your own question, and a real person, me, answers you myself. Thousands of Old Ways folks like you are already in there with us. Just point your phone's camera at the code on the screen, and you can cancel any time, no risk at all. Now that your wrists are moving right, there's one thing that could still be quietly costing you distance, how you're holding the club. What I found when I tested it truly surprised me. That's coming up right here.